Let's take a look at project 2. During the first week, you already did get some information about this. We took a look at some examples of student work, and the examples are repeated here. This is in the week 3 lesson folder. So these examples were created in InDesign, and then the illustrations that you're creating for project 1 are going to be positioned inside the layout. An example here is one that I worked on, and this one has a single spot illustration that's a little bit more detailed, and the requirements are listed here. Some of these we've gone over already, but let's just take a look at some of the more important ones. The first most important one is that you're going to be creating a one-page menu design. It's going to be in Adobe InDesign, page layout software, and you're going to incorporate your completed vector illustrations that you created for project 1. So those are illustrations that you've created using Illustrator and you've saved as an EPS file. You need to use a grid. In other words, you're going to be dividing your layout into columns. For this Papa's Pizzeria menu, I've used a 2-column layout, and I'm using the rule of thirds. So 1/3 of the page is occupied by the logo and a large illustration, and 2/3 of the page is occupied by the menu information. If we take a look at the student examples, it's the same thing. This student used a 2-column layout. She used the rule of thirds, so approximately 1/3 of the layout is taken up by the name and 2/3 is taken up by the menu item information. This Candy Cloud layout I would consider a 3-column layout. If we take a look at this, we could see that one entire column is occupied by this ice cream cone illustration, and then 2 columns are spanned by the menu information. It also uses the rule of thirds both vertically and horizontally. So we have vertically the layout divided by 2/3, 1/3, and also horizontally we have the layout divided by 2/3, 1/3. So 1/3 of the layout is Candy Cloud, and the other 2/3 is taken up by menu information. So back to the requirements. So you're going to just want to use good principles of design. You want to make sure that your typography is easy to read. You should use a typographic hierarchy. In other words, more important information is going to be somewhat larger or bolder than less important information. So the name of the restaurant, Papa's Pizzeria, is large because it's important. You want to be able to identify the restaurant. Specialty Pizza is treated as a subhead on a secondary level. And then you also have the pricing information, which is treated somewhat differently. So it's easy for the reader to zero in on exactly the type of information that they're looking for. All right, so we want to use letter size, which is 8.5 by 11. This is intended for print, so we're going to use CMYK color build. That's cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. You should have a minimum of a 1/4 inch margin for all the text. In other words, you don't want your text going right to the edge of the page or just 1/8 of an inch. You don't want it too close. Just give it a comfortable margin. Follow the instructions for the file naming conventions that we've been using so far. So file naming conventions means that you're going to follow the instructions in this assignment submission example.